So Aaron, structuring content is not really just about system to system portability, right? The moving from a CMS out to the distribution channels. So that portability that we were just talking about, that big stick, that's one very important reason to focus on I call it a practice, the practice of disciplining of engineering content, which has multiple disciplines. At least in my view, the content modeling is a discipline, part of the practice of content engineering, shared with content strategists and content strategy. So there's sort of disciplines that can be shared across practices. At least that's the hierarchy I put in my brain. And then I see roles as separately distinct from either practices or disciplines. But you know, the structure that gets represented in markup is also being expressed for search engines as annotations within the markup. So we're not just expressing structure for portability like XML-based structures. We're not just expressing structure for, hey, what fields do I have in my CMS, or in the many different pieces of technology that interact with the content. But it's also the structures are being used. Let's say it's a title to add a schema.org annotation into that resulting markup being published, and thereby enabling machines to annotate our content and then to consume our content. That whole art has become known in part as structured data, and I think the definition of structured data is a lot bigger than that. But that markup, and I know that's really important to EA and to your content workflows and processes, and I'd love to hear about how structured content and structured data impacts your content workflows and processes at EA, and what are those business impacts that make it worthwhile spending valuable time on?
Sure. You know, I think it's, in some ways your work is done once you structure the content to begin with, and especially in regard to the semantics, because in terms of any, and I'll just broadly speak of, let's say, schema.org as metadata output. I mean, there's structure within there, but it's mostly to convey meaning about the work, but as well as some presentation details. And I also throw into that things like Twitter cards, open graph markup, any sort of integrator prescribed markup. You always have to map, right? And to use your example, if you've got something that is within your content model called a title, schema.org requires it as a name, Open Graph requires it as OGB title, right? It's just exponentially easier to create and maintain those mappings once you've structured the content to begin with, and then if necessary layer on anything special about a particular content type for that, and then that makes that very easy to include a payload or even an independent feed of structured content for a particular content item. And I think critically also allows publishers to readily respond, as kind of related to an earlier point you made. Something else comes along, right? Some other social network with its own prescribed markup. It's a relatively trivial task to map that from your own content fields to an output format that then is going to be usable by that network. So yeah, the fundamental work of creating structured data markup really takes place at the content model design level, right? Knowing that you need to produce this, and then what does it map to, and how can those values be transformed?
I forget who the philosopher was. It says, "Give me a long enough lever, and I can move the world."
Yes.
Who said that? But that, I mean, that's interesting, because the content, the content model there is this lever for moving publishing, right? And
It is.
interesting. Thank you.
And I'll finally just a quick note on that. A good example is recipes are a really good example of a lot of this, because as a very prescribed markup format in schema.org or earlier predecessors, if I was publishing a food site, that would be a really important consideration for that content to support that sort of structure. And then it's an immediate pathway in a lot of different environments, not only in terms of the Google rich results snippets that you get in web or mobile search, but it automatically qualifies those recipes to be returned by a Google Home Assistant, including by Google Assistant, including a Google Home. So again, having extensibility just by dint of thinking through at the outset of your modeling what sort of output needs to be required.
Yeah. I think with content modeling, there's so many ways to conceive of what the modeling exercise is accomplishing. If it's a lever, what is the lever? Where is the lever being exercised? Is it towards presentation? Is it towards machine consumption? Is it towards understanding at the level of reusability by voice interfaces? So we have so many things to model for, and I think that's one of the reasons we spent a lot of time innovating this concept of the master content model, is because there are all of these different ways to mark up the content at a structural level, like you mentioned, Open Graph and schema.org and various kinds of marketing-based renderings. But there's also DITA, which is an understanding of content at a much more granular or topic-based level that is being used to structure content within a lot of support content sets and documentation content sets. And there's other standards that Ulrike will talk to us about in just a few minutes that need to be aligned. And how do we get all of that to work together? And that's a hard thing. And so getting it into a shape to correlate and then to be ideally interrogatable by machine, that's the thing that we have to get to, so that there's portable schemas and portable mappings, for that crosswalk between which element is being used to which various usages and markup renderings.
To listen in on the full Roundtable conversation and others, plus get access to more exclusive insight about omnichannel customer experiences, join the content order for free at simpleA.com.